Jimin clapped his hands with a smile on the live broadcast after Jungkook told this story. A shocking confession on live broadcast shatters trust as Jimin smiles. What secret did Jungkook reveal that changed everything forever? The silence cracked not from a scream but from applause. Jimin's hands came together softly once, twice, echoing through the studio like something fragile breaking in slow motion. His smile followed, gentle, almost tender, but his eyes didn't match. They never did when he was hiding something. Across from him, Jungkook froze. The live broadcast light glowed red. Millions were watching. "I told you not to say that," Jimin said lightly, almost teasing, leaning back in his chair as if Jungkook hadn't just dropped something irreparable into the air. Jungkook swallowed, his throat felt dry like he'd been running for miles. "You said we shouldn't lie anymore." The room tightened. Staff members stood still behind the cameras, their hands hovering uselessly over controls. The producers exchanged looks, uncertain, uneasy. Something had shifted, something off-script, something dangerously real. Jimin tilted his head, his smile widening just a fraction. There's a difference between honesty and recklessness. The chat feed beside the broadcast exploded, hearts, questions, confusion. Fans were sensing it too, the tension, the fracture. Jungkook looked down at his hands, clenched tightly in his lap. His knuckles were white. He had always been the stronger one physically, but right now he felt unbearably small. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he said quietly. Jimin clapped again, slower this time, deliberate. "I know," he replied, "that's what makes it worse." The words landed like a blade wrapped in silk. Jungkook's chest tightened. He forced himself to meet Jimin's gaze, searching for something, anger maybe, or forgiveness. Instead, he found something colder, something calculating. And that terrified him. Because Jimin wasn't supposed to look at him like that. Not after everything. The host, visibly shaken, tried to regain control. "Ah well, that was certainly unexpected, perhaps we can." "No," Jimin interrupted smoothly, never taking his eyes off Jungkook. "Let's not pretend this is just another story." Jungkook felt the weight of every camera lens turned toward him. His pulse roared in his ears. He hadn't planned to say it, not like that, not here. But something inside him had snapped when the question came. "What's the one thing you regret not telling someone important to you?" It should have been simple, a safe answer, a vague memory. Instead, Jungkook had laughed nervously at first, then bitterly, and said that "I knew the truth all along, and I stayed quiet." The studio had gone still. And Jimin had clapped. Now, sitting under the suffocating heat of the lights, Jungkook realized the mistake wasn't just the confession. It was who he had looked at when he said it. Jimin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Go on," he said softly, "tell them the rest." Jungkook's breath hitched. The rest. His mind flashed back, late nights, whispered arguments, the sound of a door slamming shut. The memory of Jimin's voice breaking, not in anger but in something far more dangerous, disappointment. "You promised," Jimin had said back then, his voice trembling just enough to haunt Jungkook for years. "You promised you wouldn't hide things from me." "I didn't," Jungkook had insisted, but it had been a lie. A necessary one, or so he thought. Now, under the unforgiving glare of reality, that lie felt like poison. "I can't," Jungkook said, barely above a whisper. Jimin smiled again, softer now, almost sympathetic. "You already did." A flicker of something passed through his eyes, pain, maybe, or anger buried so deep it had turned into something else entirely. "Do you know what I regret?" Jimin continued, turning slightly toward the camera, his voice steady, controlled. "I regret trusting someone who thought silence was kindness." Jungkook's heart dropped. The words weren't loud, but they carried. They always did when Jimin meant them. "I thought protecting you was the right thing," Jungkook said, his voice cracking. "I thought if you didn't know." "If I didn't know what?" Jimin cut in sharply. "That you chose them over me." The air shattered. A collective gasp rippled through the studio. Jungkook's vision blurred. "That's not." "Then what is it?" Jimin pressed, his composure slipping just enough to reveal the storm beneath. "Explain it to me, Jungkook, explain it to everyone." Jungkook opened his mouth, but no words came. Because the truth was too complicated, too ugly. Because the truth was that he had made a choice. and he had lost something irreplaceable because of it. The host tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. Perhaps we should take a short break. No, Jungkook said suddenly, his voice louder than he intended. The room stilled again. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting Jimin's fully this time. There was no escaping it anymore. You want the truth, Jungkook said, his voice trembling but firm. Fine. Jimin didn't move, didn't blink. Jungkook inhaled sharply. I stayed quiet because I knew if you found out, you would leave. A pause. A heartbeat. And you did, Jungkook added softly. Jimin's expression flickered. Just for a second. But Jungkook saw it. The crack in the armor. The memory. The hurt. You're rewriting history, Jimin said, his voice colder now. I left because you lied. I lied because I was afraid, Jungkook shot back, the words bursting out of him. Afraid of losing you, afraid of what it would do to us. And look where that got us, Jimin replied, his tone almost eerily calm. The distance between them felt infinite. The years, the memories, the unspoken things, they all stretched out like a chasm neither of them knew how to cross anymore. The red light of the camera still blinked. Still recording. Still capturing every fracture, every raw edge of something that had once been unbreakable. Jimin leaned back again, exhaling slowly. His smile returned, but this time it was different. Not warm. Not soft. But final. You should have trusted me with the truth, he said quietly. Jungkook felt something inside him collapse. I did, he whispered, just not in time. Silence fell again. Heavy, suffocating. And then Jimin clapped his hands one last time. A soft, echoing sound that felt like the closing of a door. Thank you for sharing your story, he said, turning to the camera with a professional ease that felt almost cruel. I hope it helps someone out there make better choices. Jungkook stared at him, his chest aching, his thoughts unraveling. Because he realized in that moment something far worse than the confession itself. Jimin wasn't angry anymore. He had already moved on. And Jungkook was still trapped in the past they had destroyed together. The moment the broadcast cut to black, the silence didn't disappear, it thickened. The red light blinked off, but no one moved. For a split second, the studio existed in a vacuum, suspended between performance and reality, where no one knew whether to clap, intervene, or pretend nothing had just happened. Then everything collapsed at once. Cut the feed, a producer shouted, too late to matter. Staff rushed forward, voices overlapping, footsteps echoing sharply against the polished floor. Someone dropped a headset, someone else cursed under their breath. The host stood frozen, still half smiling as if his face hadn't received the message yet. Jungkook didn't hear any of it. All he could hear was the echo of Jimin's last clap. Soft final. Like a verdict. You really chose to do that here. Jimin's voice cut through the noise, low and controlled, but unmistakably sharp. Jungkook looked up. Jimin was already standing, brushing invisible dust from his sleeve, his movements precise, composed. Too composed. It was the kind of calm that came after something had already shattered beyond repair. I didn't plan it, Jungkook said, his voice rough. It just happened. Jimin let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Funny how it always just happens when it comes to you. That's not fair. No, Jimin stepped closer, his gaze locking onto Jungkook's. Then tell me what is. The distance between them closed, but it didn't feel like proximity. It felt like confrontation, like standing at the edge of something dangerous. Jungkook stood too, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. You're acting like I betrayed you again. Again, Jimin repeated softly, his eyebrow lifting. So you admit it was a betrayal. Jungkook hesitated. That was all the confirmation Jimin needed. A bitter smile tugged at his lips. Unbelievable. I didn't mean it like that, Jungkook rushed, his words tripping over each other. I meant back then. Things were different, I was different. And now, Jimin asked. Jungkook faltered. Because that was the problem. Now wasn't so different after all. Jimin's eyes darkened, the faintest crack in his composure finally surfacing. You think saying it on live broadcast fixes anything? You think confessing in front of millions suddenly makes you honest? I wasn't trying to fix it, Jungkook said. I just couldn't keep it in anymore. Jimin scoffed, so I'm just collateral damage in your moment of emotional release. The words hit harder than Jungkook expected. That's not what you are to me, he said quietly. Jimin's expression didn't soften, if anything, it hardened further. Then what am I, he asked. Jungkook opened his mouth, but the answer tangled somewhere between his chest and his throat. Everything he wanted to say felt too late. Too small. Too meaningless now. Jimin watched him struggle and something in his eyes shifted, not quite anger, not quite sadness, but something colder, something resigned. Exactly, Jimin said, stepping back, you don't even know anymore. That's not true, Jungkook's voice rose, drawing a few startled glances from nearby staff. I know exactly what you are to me, I just... Just what? Jimin pressed, his voice suddenly sharp again. Just didn't think it was important enough to prove. Jungkook's chest tightened. You don't get it, he said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I was trying to protect you. Jimin's laugh this time was louder, edged with disbelief. Protect me from what, Jungkook, the truth or yourself? Jungkook froze. Jimin stepped closer again, his voice dropping to something dangerously quiet. You always do this. You hide behind this idea that you're saving people, but really you're just avoiding the consequences of your own choices. That's not fair, Jungkook said again, but his voice lacked conviction this time. Because deep down he knew there was truth in it. Jimin exhaled slowly, his shoulders rising and falling as if he were trying to steady himself. Do you even remember what you promised me? Jungkook's heart skipped. Of course he remembered. Too clearly. I remember, he said. Then say it. Jungkook hesitated. Jimin's eyes narrowed. Say it. I promised I wouldn't keep things from you, Jungkook admitted, his voice barely audible. And yet, Jimin said softly, here we are. The weight of those words settled heavily between them. Around them, the studio continued to buzz with activity, staff whispering, equipment being moved, producers arguing in hushed tones, but it all felt distant, like background noise to something far more important unraveling in real time. Jungkook took a step forward, his voice desperate now. I can still fix this. Jimin shook his head immediately. No. The certainty in that single word was devastating. You don't get to fix this whenever it's convenient for you, Jimin continued. You don't get to disappear into silence and then come back with a dramatic confession like it erases everything. I'm not trying to erase it, Jungkook insisted. I'm trying to face it. Too late. The words came out without hesitation. Without doubt. And that hurt more than anything else. Jungkook felt his chest tighten painfully. So that's it, you're just done. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. As if memorizing something he was about to let go of. I was done a long time ago, Jimin said quietly. The world seemed to tilt. Jungkook's breath caught, then why did you stay? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Jimin's expression flickered again, something raw, something unguarded, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it came. Habit, he said simply. Jungkook felt like he'd been punched. Habit, he repeated, disbelief lacing his voice. Jimin nodded, his gaze steady now, and maybe hope at first. The admission hung in the air. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice softening, and now. Jimin didn't answer right away. For a moment the tension between them shifted, not gone but different, heavier, more fragile. Now, Jimin said slowly, I think I finally understand something. Jungkook's heart pounded. What? Jimin's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. Some things don't break all at once. Jungkook's stomach dropped. They crack, Jimin continued, his voice calm, almost reflective. Little by little, every lie, every silence, every time you choose not to say what matters. Each word felt like a quiet unraveling. And by the time you realize it, Jimin finished, there's nothing left to hold together. Jungkook couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Because he could see it now too. All the moments he thought didn't matter. All the times he told himself he'd explain later. Later had never come. Until now. And now it meant nothing. Jimin took a step back, creating space between them again. You wanted honesty, he said, so here it is. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. Jimin. I don't hate you, Jimin said, cutting him off. The words were unexpected, but they didn't bring relief. If I did, Jimin continued, this would be easier. Jungkook's chest ached. Then what do you feel? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. Jimin hesitated. For the first time since the broadcast ended, he looked uncertain. I feel, he started then stopped. His gaze dropped for a second, as if searching for something he couldn't quite grasp. And when he looked back up, whatever softness had been there was gone. I feel done, he said. The finality in his voice was absolute. Jungkook stood there, unable to move, unable to respond. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to defend. Only the hollow echo of everything they hadn't said when it still mattered. Jimin turned away then, signaling the end of the conversation without another word. And for the first time, Jungkook didn't follow. The hallway outside the studio felt colder than it should have been. Jungkook stood there long after Jimin walked away, the echo of his footsteps fading into something permanent, something irreversible. The noise from inside the studio blurred into a distant hum like a world he no longer belonged to. Are you just going to stand there all night? The voice snapped him out of it. Jungkook turned. It was one of the senior producers, arms crossed, eyes sharp but not unkind. You've caused enough chaos for one broadcast, he added, quieter this time. You should probably leave before this turns into something worse. Jungkook let out a dry breath. Isn't it already? The producer didn't answer, he didn't need to. Jungkook ran a hand over his face, exhaustion crashing into him all at once. His body felt heavy, like he'd been holding everything together for too long and it had finally given out. But his mind wouldn't stop. Jimin's voice kept replaying. I feel done. Not angry, not hurt. Done. That was what terrified him the most. Anger meant something was still there. This felt like emptiness. Jungkook pushed himself off the wall and started walking, not really knowing where he was going. The corridor stretched endlessly, lights too bright, too sterile, every step echoed too loudly like it was accusing him of something. Or maybe that was just his conscience. He turned the corner and stopped. Jimin. Leaning against the far wall, half hidden in shadow, his head tilted back slightly as if he'd been staring at the ceiling for a long time. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight, the tension in his posture unmistakable. Jungkook's breath caught. You're still here, he said before he could stop himself. Jimin didn't move right away. Then slowly he lowered his head, his gaze finding Jungkook. Looks like you are too. The air shifted instantly. He wasn't gone. Not yet. Jungkook took a step closer, cautious, like approaching something fragile that could shatter again at any moment. I thought you left. Jimin let out a quiet exhale. I was about to. But you didn't. A pause. Jimin straightened slightly, pushing himself off the wall. Don't read into it. I'm not, Jungkook said quickly, I just. Just what? Jimin cut in, his voice already sharpening. Looking for another chance to say something you should have said years ago. Jungkook flinched. That's not fair, he said again, the words sounding weaker every time he repeated them. Jimin's lips pressed into a thin line. You keep saying that but you never explain why. Jungkook stepped closer, frustration creeping into his voice. Because you don't listen. Jimin's eyes flashed. I listened, he snapped. I listened every time you said later, every time you said it's nothing, every time you looked me in the eye and chose silence. That's not listening, Jungkook shot back, that's assuming the worst. And what was I supposed to assume? Jimin demanded, his voice rising, that you had a good reason for lying to me. I didn't lie about everything. Jimin laughed, sharp and disbelieving, that's supposed to make it better. Jungkook ran his hands through his hair, packing now, unable to stay still. You're twisting it. No, Jimin said, stepping forward, closing the space between them again. I'm finally seeing it clearly. Their proximity felt electric. Dangerous. Jungkook could feel the heat of Jimin's presence, the tension radiating off him. It made everything harder, thinking, breathing, holding onto whatever fragile control he had left. You think this is all my fault, Jungkook said, his voice dropping. Jimin didn't hesitate, it is. The bluntness of it hit like a punch. Jungkook stared at him, something inside him snapping, you're not innocent either. Jimin's expression hardened instantly. Excuse me. You left, Jungkook said, his voice gaining strength. You didn't even try to stay and fix it. Jimin's eyes narrowed. Fix what? A relationship built on half-truths and secrets. We could have worked through it. With what? Jimin shot back. More lies, more excuses. With honesty, Jungkook said, his voice breaking. With time. You had time, Jimin's voice cut through his. You had so much time, Jungkook, and you wasted it. The words hung heavy between them. Jungkook felt his chest tighten painfully. I didn't know how to tell you. Jimin's gaze flickered just for a second. So you chose not to tell me at all. I was scared. Jimin's expression shifted again, something softer threatening to surface, but it hardened just as quickly. You're always scared, he said quietly, and I'm always the one paying for it. Jungkook's throat tightened. That's not true, he whispered. Jimin tilted his head slightly, studying him. Then prove it. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Jungkook hesitated. Because he didn't know how. Not anymore. Jimin let out a slow breath, shaking his head. That's what I thought. Frustration flared in Jungkook's chest. You're not even giving me a chance. I gave you years, Jimin said. How many more do you need? Jungkook stepped closer again, his voice desperate now. Just one more. Jimin went still. The air between them seemed to freeze. One more what? He asked quietly. Chance, Jungkook said, to be honest, to fix this, to show you that I'm not. Not what? Jimin interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Not the person who hurt me. Jungkook's words faltered. Jimin's gaze didn't waver. Because you are. The truth of it settled heavily. Unavoidable. Jungkook swallowed hard. People can change. Jimin let out a quiet, almost tired laugh. Maybe. There was a pause. A long, fragile pause. But not when it matters, Jimin added. Jungkook felt something crack inside him. You don't believe that, he said, almost pleading. Jimin didn't respond right away. His eyes searched Jungkook's face as if looking for something that used to be there, something he couldn't find anymore. I used to, Jimin admitted softly. The words were gentle. But they hurt more than anything else. Jungkook's breath hitched, then believe it again. Jimin shook his head slowly. It doesn't work like that. Why not? Because trust doesn't come back just because you want it to, Jimin said. It comes back when it feels safe. Jungkook's voice dropped to a whisper. I can make it feel safe. Jimin's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. But then, you already had that chance. The finality returned. Stronger than before. Jungkook felt the last thread of hope slip through his fingers. Jimin, he started, his voice breaking. But Jimin stepped back. Far enough to create distance. Far enough to make it clear. This conversation isn't going to change anything, he said quietly. Jungkook shook his head. It already has. Jimin paused. Jungkook took a shaky breath. At least now you know the truth. Jimin's expression shifted again, subtle, complicated. I always knew there was something, he said. I just didn't know how much you were hiding. Jungkook looked down, guilt crashing over him. I'm sorry, he said. The words felt small. Insufficient. Jimin closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself against something. Then he opened them again. You don't get to fix this with an apology, he said. I know, Jungkook admitted, but it's all I have right now. Another silence. Heavier this time. Jimin studied him for a long moment. And then finally. I believe you're sorry. Jungkook's head snapped up. Hope flickered. But that doesn't change what happened, Jimin continued. The hope dimmed. And it doesn't change how I feel now. Jungkook nodded slowly, the weight of it settling in. I understand. Jimin's gaze lingered on him for a second longer. Then he turned. Again. But this time his steps were slower. More deliberate. As if each one meant something. Jungkook didn't call out to him. Didn't try to stop him. He just stood there watching until Jimin disappeared down the corridor. And this time, he knew. There was no unfinished sentence left between them. Only the quiet, undeniable truth that some things didn't end in anger. They ended in silence. The rain started before Jungkook even realized he had left the building. Cold drops hit his face, sharp and sudden, dragging him out of the numb haze he'd been walking through. The city lights blurred in the wet pavement, stretching into distorted reflections that made everything feel unreal, like he was moving through a memory instead of the present. He didn't remember taking the stairs. Didn't remember pushing through the glass doors. But now he was outside, soaked within seconds, his breath uneven, his chest too tight. And still, Jimin's voice wouldn't stop echoing. I feel done. Jungkook clenched his jaw, forcing himself forward step after step as if motion alone could outrun the weight pressing down on him. Cars passed, headlights slicing through the rain, but he barely registered them. He should go home. That was the logical thing. Instead, his feet carried him somewhere else. Somewhere familiar. The small side street was almost empty at this hour, the soft glow of a single flickering street lamp illuminating the entrance of a quiet building. Jungkook stopped a few steps away, staring at it like it might disappear if he got any closer. He hadn't been here in a long time. Not since everything fell apart. Of course you'd come back here. The voice came from behind him. Jungkook froze. Slowly he turned. Jimin stood a few meters away, an umbrella in one hand, his dark coat clinging slightly to his frame from the damp air. His expression was unreadable again, but there was something in his eyes, something tired, something knowing. Jungkook let out a hollow laugh. Are you following me now? Jimin shook his head faintly. You're predictable. Jungkook glanced back at the building, then at Jimin. So are you. A beat of silence passed between them, filled only by the steady rhythm of rain hitting pavement. You came here too, Jungkook said quietly. Jimin stepped forward, stopping just close enough that they could see each other clearly under the dim light. I didn't plan to. But you did. Jimin didn't deny it. That alone said more than words could. Jungkook looked back at the building again, memories pressing in from all sides, the late nights, the laughter, the arguments that never seemed serious back then. It felt like another lifetime. Do you remember the first time we came here? Jungkook asked. Jimin exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting past Jungkook to the door. You dragged me here because you said the coffee was life-changing. Jungkook almost smiled. It was. It was terrible, Jimin corrected. Jungkook let out a small breath of laughter, the sound fragile, unfamiliar after everything that had happened. For a moment the tension eased. Just a little. But it didn't last. Why did you really come here? Jimin asked, his voice cutting through the brief softness. Jungkook hesitated. Because it's the only place that still feels the same, he admitted. Jimin's expression shifted, something flickering beneath the surface. Nothing is the same. I know, Jungkook said quickly, but it reminds me of when things were. Jimin looked at him for a long moment, rain tapping softly against his umbrella. You're holding onto something that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe, Jungkook said, or maybe I just don't want to forget it. Jimin's grip on the umbrella tightened slightly. You think I forgot? He asked quietly. Jungkook met his eyes. No. Then what? Jimin pressed. You think I'm just unaffected by all of it. That's how you act, Jungkook said, frustration slipping into his voice. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Jimin's gaze sharpened. That's because I learned how to live with it. By pretending it didn't hurt. By not letting it control me, Jimin shot back. Jungkook took a step closer, rain soaking through his clothes, his hair clinging to his forehead. And is that working? Jimin didn't answer right away. The silence stretched. Then, yes. Jungkook laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're lying. Jimin's eyes flashed. You don't get to call me a liar. Then stop acting like everything is fine, Jungkook said, his voice rising, because it's not for me, and I don't think it is for you either. Jimin stepped forward, closing the distance between them again, his expression tightening. You don't get to decide how I feel. I'm not deciding, Jungkook said, I'm seeing. Seeing what? Jimin challenged. The version of me you want to believe in. No, Jungkook said firmly, the version of you that still showed up here tonight. That hit something. Jimin's expression flickered, his composure cracking just slightly. But he recovered quickly. I came here because it's on my way, he said. Jungkook shook his head. No, it's not. Jimin didn't respond. Because they both knew the truth. The rain fell heavier now, the sound louder, more insistent, like it was trying to drown out the conversation. "Why are you doing this?" Jimin asked suddenly, his voice quieter now, almost tired. "Why are you pushing this?" Jungkook's chest tightened, "Because I'm not ready to let go." Jimin's gaze dropped for a second before lifting again. "You don't have a choice." "I do," Jungkook said. "I can choose to fight for it." "For what?" Jimin asked, his voice sharp again. "For something that's already broken." "For something that meant everything," Jungkook replied. The words hung in the air. Heavy. Unavoidable. Jimin looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment something softened in his eyes again, something fragile, something dangerous. "You're too late," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head immediately. "I don't believe that." Jimin let out a slow breath, his shoulders dropping slightly. "That's the problem, you believe things long after they stop being real." Jungkook stepped even closer now, close enough that the edge of Jimin's umbrella barely covered him. "Then tell me it never mattered." Jimin froze. The question landed harder than anything else. "Tell me," Jungkook repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me none of it meant anything to you." Jimin's grip tightened again. His jaw clenched. But he didn't speak. Because he couldn't. Jungkook saw it. And something inside him shifted. "You can't even say it," Jungkook said softly. Jimin looked away, his silence louder than any answer. "That means it still matters," Jungkook continued. Jimin shook his head, his voice low and strained. "That's not enough." "It's something," Jungkook insisted. "It's not enough," Jimin repeated, this time more firmly. The rain dripped from the edge of the umbrella, the space between them impossibly small now. Jungkook's voice softened. "Then what is?" Jimin hesitated. For the first time he looked uncertain. "I don't know," he admitted. The honesty in his voice was raw. Unfiltered. Jungkook felt his heart ache at the sound of it. "Then let's figure it out," he said. Jimin let out a quiet, almost broken laugh. "You really think it's that simple?" "No," Jungkook said, "but I think it's worth trying." Jimin's eyes searched his face again, looking for something, proof, maybe, or certainty. "You're asking me to risk everything again," Jimin said. "I'm asking you to not give up," Jungkook replied. Jimin's expression tightened. "I already did that once and look how it ended." Jungkook swallowed hard. "I know." "Do you?" Jimin asked, his voice sharp again. "Do you really understand what it was like, waiting for you to tell me the truth, knowing something was wrong but not knowing what?" Jungkook's chest ached. "I do now." Jimin laughed bitterly. "That's convenient." "It's not," Jungkook said, "it's painful." "Good," Jimin said quietly. The word wasn't cruel. It was honest. Jungkook nodded slowly. "I deserve that." Jimin looked at him, something unreadable in his gaze. "You don't get to decide what you deserve," he said. "I do." Jungkook didn't argue. Because Jimin was right. The rain continued to fall, soaking through everything, blurring the edges of the world around them. And for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Because for the first time, there were no easy words left. Only the truth. And the unbearable weight of what came with it. The cafe door creaked open before either of them realized they were moving. A soft bell rang above them, faint and almost nostalgic, and the warmth inside wrapped around Jungkook like something dangerously familiar. The smell of coffee, burnt, slightly bitter, hit him instantly, pulling memories to the surface whether he wanted them or not. Jimin stepped in first. Of course he did. He always moved first when things became unbearable, as if control over motion could compensate for the chaos underneath. Jungkook followed, dripping rainwater onto the wooden floor, his shoes leaving faint marks behind him. The place hadn't changed much. Same dim lights, same worn tables, same quiet hum of a refrigerator somewhere in the back. It felt like stepping into a preserved moment. Or a trap. "You're going to get everything wet," Jimin muttered, shrugging off his coat and hanging it by the door. Jungkook glanced down at himself, water dripping from his sleeves. "You came in too." "I had an umbrella." "You still got wet." Jimin shot him a look. "That's not the point." Jungkook almost smiled again, but it faded quickly. Nothing about this was light enough for that anymore. They stood there awkwardly for a moment before Jimin moved toward the counter, his movements automatic. 2 Americanos, he said to the barista without looking back. Jungkook frowned slightly, you didn't even ask me. Jimin paused. For just a second. Then quietly, you always order the same thing. Jungkook's chest tightened. That shouldn't matter anymore. But it did. They took a seat by the window, the same one they used to fight over because Jungkook liked watching people pass by and Jimin liked the corner for its quiet. Tonight neither of them argued. They just sat. The rain tapped steadily against the glass, blurring the outside world into streaks of light and shadow. For a while neither of them spoke. And somehow, the silence felt heavier than anything they had said earlier. You shouldn't have come here, Jimin said finally, his voice low. Jungkook looked at him, you're here too. I shouldn't be either. Then why are you? Jimin didn't answer immediately. He stared at the table, his fingers tracing faint patterns on the wood. I thought maybe it wouldn't feel like this anymore, he admitted. Jungkook's breath caught, like what? Jimin's jaw tightened, like everything's still unfinished. The word hung there. Unfinished. Jungkook leaned forward slightly, then maybe it is. Jimin's eyes snapped up, don't. Don't what? Jungkook asked. Don't turn this into hope, Jimin said, his voice sharp. Not everything that feels unfinished needs to be continued. Jungkook shook his head, that doesn't make sense. It does, Jimin insisted. Some things stay unfinished because they're not meant to be completed. Jungkook stared at him, frustration building again, or because we didn't try hard enough. Jimin laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You really believe that, don't you? I do. Jimin leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Then you're still the same. And you're not, Jungkook shot back. No, Jimin said simply. Jungkook's brows furrowed, then prove it. Jimin tilted his head, you want proof? Yes. Jimin leaned forward again, his gaze locking onto Jungkook's. Fine. There was something in his eyes now, something sharper, more dangerous than before. Tell me the truth, Jimin said, the whole truth. Jungkook's chest tightened. You already know. No, Jimin cut in, I know pieces, I want everything. Jungkook hesitated. Because everything meant going back. Back to the moment that started it all. Back to the choice he had made. And the person he had chosen. You're asking for something you might not want to hear, Jungkook said carefully. Jimin didn't blink, try me. Jungkook looked down at his hands, the memory rising whether he wanted it or not. It wasn't just one time, he said slowly. Jimin went still. It wasn't just one lie, Jungkook continued. It was a lot of small ones. Jimin's fingers curled slightly against the table. I kept telling myself they didn't matter, Jungkook said, that I'd tell you eventually. That I just needed the right moment. And that moment never came, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded. Because I was afraid of what would happen if you knew everything, he added. Jimin's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. And what exactly was everything? Jungkook hesitated again. Jimin's gaze sharpened, say it. Jungkook forced himself to meet his eyes, I didn't just choose them over you once. The words landed like a crack through glass. Jimin didn't move. I kept choosing them, Jungkook admitted, his voice breaking slightly, again and again. The cafe suddenly felt too quiet. Too small. And you never thought to tell me, Jimin asked, his voice dangerously calm. I wanted to, Jungkook said quickly. Every time I wanted to, but it got harder the longer I waited. So you just kept lying. I thought I was protecting you, Jungkook said again, weaker this time. Jimin let out a sharp breath, leaning back as if the words had physically hit him. Stop saying that, he muttered. It's true. It's not, Jimin snapped, his voice rising for the first time since they sat down. You weren't protecting me, you were protecting yourself. Jungkook flinched. I was protecting us, he insisted. There was no us in your decisions, Jimin shot back. You made them alone, you kept secrets alone, and now you want to fix it together. Jungkook had no answer. Because Jimin was right. Again. You don't get to rewrite what happened just because you regret it now, Jimin continued, his voice shaking slightly despite his effort to stay composed. I'm not rewriting it, Jungkook said, I'm owning it. Too late. The words came out instantly. Jungkook clenched his jaw. You keep saying that. Because it's true, Jimin said, you had so many chances. Jungkook leaned forward, desperation creeping back into his voice, and I'm asking for one more. Jimin shook his head immediately. No. Why not? Jungkook demanded. Because I know how this ends, Jimin said. I've lived it already. You don't know that, Jungkook argued. I do, Jimin insisted, because you haven't changed the one thing that matters. Jungkook frowned. What? Jimin held his gaze. You still wait until you're about to lose everything before you tell the truth. The words hit harder than anything else. Because they were undeniable. Jungkook sat back slowly, the fight draining out of him. I didn't realize it until now, he admitted. Jimin's expression didn't soften. That doesn't undo anything, he said. I know. Silence fell again, heavier than before. The barista placed their drinks on the table quietly, sensing the tension, then quickly retreated. Neither of them touched their cups. I need to ask you something, Jimin said after a long pause. Jungkook looked up. What? Jimin hesitated, his composure slipping just slightly. Did you ever think about telling me the truth before everything fell apart? He asked. Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. Yes. Jimin's eyes searched his face. Then why didn't you? Jungkook swallowed hard. Because I knew it would hurt you. Jimin let out a quiet, broken laugh. And this does. Jungkook had no answer. Because there wasn't one. Jimin shook his head, looking away. You really don't understand, do you? Then help me understand, Jungkook said softly. Jimin looked back at him, his eyes sharper now, but there was something else too, something raw, something close to breaking. You didn't just hurt me because you lied, Jimin said. You hurt me because you decided I couldn't handle the truth. Jungkook felt his chest tighten painfully. You took that choice away from me, Jimin continued, and that's what I can't forgive. The words settled heavily. Final. Jungkook nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't think of it like that. I know, Jimin said. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Because it meant Jungkook hadn't even realized the depth of what he'd done. Jimin stood up then, his chair scraping softly against the floor. Jungkook looked up, panic flickering in his chest. You're leaving. Jimin paused, looking down at him. I never planned to stay, he said. Jungkook stood too, his hands tightening at his sides. Jimin. Don't, Jimin said, his voice firm but not loud. Jungkook froze. Jimin's gaze softened for a brief moment. Some things you have to learn to live with, he said quietly. Jungkook's throat tightened. I don't want to live with this. Jimin's expression shifted, something almost like sadness passing through his eyes. Then you should have made different choices, he said. The truth of it settled like a weight Jungkook couldn't lift. Jimin picked up his coat, slipping it on without another word. And this time, Jungkook didn't try to stop him. Because for the first time, he understood something he hadn't before. Not every ending comes with a chance to fight for it. Some endings are simply the result of everything that came before. The chair across from Jungkook was still warm when the door closed behind Jimin. That was the cruelest part. Not the words, not even the finality in his tone. But the warmth that lingered, as if Jimin had only stepped away for a moment and might come back if Jungkook just waited long enough. He didn't move. Didn't reach for the coffee. Didn't even blink for what felt like minutes. The rain outside softened, turning into a faint drizzle, tapping gently against the glass like something hesitant, something unsure whether to stay or disappear. Jungkook let out a slow breath, his fingers curling around the edge of the table. Pathetic. The word slipped out under his breath, barely audible. But it was enough. Enough to break whatever fragile stillness he had been holding onto. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, drawing a quick glance from the barista. Jungkook didn't care. He grabbed his jacket, his movements rushed, uneven, like if he didn't move now, he never would. The bell above the door rang again as he stepped out. Cold air hit him instantly. Jimin was already gone. Of course he was. Jungkook clenched his jaw, scanning the street anyway, as if defying reality itself. Nothing. Just wet pavement, dim lights, and a city that didn't care about what had just fallen apart inside a quiet cafe. He ran a hand through his damp hair, exhaling sharply. Fine, he muttered to himself, if you won't come back I'll go to you. The decision settled in his chest before he could second-guess it. He knew where Jimin would go. Or at least, he hoped he did. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. Jungkook leaned against the mirrored wall staring at his reflection. His eyes looked different, tired, hollow, like something essential had been stripped away piece by piece. You look like hell, he murmured. The reflection didn't argue. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. And there it was. Jimin's apartment door. Right where it had always been. Jungkook stood there for a moment, his hand hovering just inches from the surface. His heart pounded. Loud. Relentless. This was it. No cameras. No audience. No excuses. Just truth. Or whatever was left of it. He knocked. Once. Twice. Silence. Jungkook's jaw tightened. He knocked again, harder this time. Jimin, he called, his voice steady but edged with urgency. I know you're in there. Another pause. Long enough to make doubt creep in. Then, the lock clicked. The door opened just enough for Jimin to appear, his expression already guarded. You really don't know when to stop, do you? Jimin said, his voice flat. Jungkook exhaled, relief and tension crashing together. I needed to see you. You already did, Jimin replied, several times tonight actually. Jungkook stepped closer, not enough to force his way in but enough to close the emotional distance he refused to accept. Not like this. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. And what exactly is this? Jungkook hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said it anyway. Honest. Jimin let out a quiet, disbelieving laugh. You've used that word a lot tonight. And I mean it this time. That's what you always say, Jimin shot back, right before you leave something out. Jungkook flinched. I'm not leaving anything out anymore, he said more firmly now. Jimin studied him for a long moment, his gaze searching, skeptical. Then say it, Jimin said. Whatever you came here to say all of it. Jungkook nodded slowly. His pulse spiked. Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. This was about everything he had never admitted. Even to himself. I didn't just choose them over you, Jungkook began, his voice steady but low. I chose what they represented. Jimin's expression didn't change, but his attention sharpened. What does that even mean? He asked. It means I chose safety, Jungkook said, predictability, something I thought I could control. Jimin scoffed softly, and I wasn't any of that. You were everything I couldn't control, Jungkook admitted. The words landed heavily. Honest. Unfiltered. Jimin went quiet. I didn't know how to handle that, Jungkook continued. Being with you felt real, too real, like if I lost it I'd lose everything. So you sabotaged it first, Jimin said flatly. Jungkook swallowed. I didn't think of it like that. But that's what you did, Jimin pressed. You made sure it wouldn't last. Jungkook didn't argue. Because again, Jimin was right. I thought if I kept parts of my life separate I could protect what we had, Jungkook said, but all I did was create distance. Jimin leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms, his posture guarded but less explosive than before. You didn't just create distance, he said, you made me feel like I wasn't enough to be trusted. Jungkook's chest tightened painfully. That was never true, he said quickly. It doesn't matter what was true, Jimin replied, it matters what you showed me. Silence fell between them. Thick. Heavy. Jungkook took a breath, forcing himself to keep going. I know I can't undo any of that, he said. I know I don't deserve another chance. Jimin's eyes flickered slightly. But I'm asking anyway, Jungkook added. Jimin let out a slow breath, shaking his head. You don't give up, do you? Jungkook met his gaze. Not when it matters. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that Jungkook felt something fragile begin to stir again in his chest. Hope. Dangerous. Unstable. You say it matters now, Jimin said quietly, but where was that when I needed it? Jungkook didn't hesitate this time. I was a coward. The admission hung in the air. Jimin's expression shifted. Just slightly. I was afraid of losing you, Jungkook continued. but I didn't realize I was already doing that by not being honest. Jimin's gaze dropped for a second, then lifted again. And now, he asked. Jungkook took a step closer, his voice soft but unwavering. Now I'm more afraid of never getting the chance to fix it. Jimin's jaw tightened. That's not a good enough reason for me to risk everything again, he said. I know, Jungkook replied, so don't do it for me. Jimin frowned slightly, then for who? Jungkook hesitated. Then, for you, he said. Jimin's expression hardened immediately. Don't twist this. I'm not, Jungkook said quickly. You said it yourself, it still feels unfinished. Jimin's gaze faltered for a fraction of a second. And if there's even a small part of you that still. Don't, Jimin cut in sharply, his voice rising. Don't assume what I feel. I'm not assuming, Jungkook said. I'm asking you to be honest too. Jimin went still. The shift was immediate. Sharp. Dangerous. You want honesty, Jimin said slowly. Jungkook nodded. Jimin pushed the door open wider, stepping fully into the hallway now, his presence suddenly more intense, more confrontational. Fine, he said. Jungkook's heart pounded. Jimin's eyes locked onto his, unwavering. I still care about you, Jimin admitted. The words hit harder than anything else. Jungkook's breath caught. But I don't trust you, Jimin continued. The hope flickered. And dimmed. I don't trust your words, Jimin said. I don't trust your timing, and I don't trust that this won't happen again. Jungkook swallowed hard. I understand. Do you, Jimin challenged, because understanding means accepting that this might never be what it was again. Jungkook nodded slowly. I know. And you're okay with that? No, Jungkook admitted, but I'm willing to face it. Jimin studied him closely, searching for hesitation. There was none. Only exhaustion. And something else. Determination. You're asking me to start over, Jimin said. No, Jungkook replied, I'm asking you to start from where we are now. Jimin's expression shifted again, something uncertain flickering beneath the surface. And where is that? He asked quietly. Jungkook held his gaze. Broken, he said. The honesty of it settled heavily. Jimin let out a slow breath, looking away for a moment before back at him. Broken things don't always get fixed, he said. Jungkook nodded, I know. Another pause. Long. Fragile. Then, Jimin stepped back slightly. Not closing the door. Not inviting him in. But not shutting him out either. A space. Small. Uncertain. Then prove it, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook's heart skipped. Prove that this isn't just another moment, Jimin continued. Prove that you're not going to disappear again when it gets hard. Jungkook took a slow breath. I will. Jimin's gaze held his for a second longer. Then he stepped back further, leaving the door open. Just enough. Not an invitation. But not a rejection. And for the first time, the ending didn't feel final. It felt uncertain. And maybe, just maybe, that was where everything truly began again. The door didn't close. That was the first thing Jungkook noticed as he stepped inside. Not wide open, not welcoming, just slightly ajar, as if Jimin had left himself an escape route. Or maybe it was for Jungkook, a quiet reminder that nothing here was guaranteed. The apartment felt different. Cleaner, colder. There were fewer traces of the past, fewer shared memories left in plain sight. The photos that used to sit on the shelf were gone, the extra pair of shoes by the door gone. Even the faint scent that once felt like home had been replaced with something neutral, something distant. Jungkook's chest tightened. You changed it, he said quietly. Jimin walked past him without answering, setting his umbrella aside with controlled precision. I had to. Jungkook turned, watching him. Because of me. Jimin paused for a fraction of a second. Then continued walking. Because I needed to move on, he said. The words weren't harsh. But they didn't need to be. Jungkook swallowed, stepping further inside, the door clicking softly behind him. The sound echoed louder than it should have. A point of no return. Jimin moved into the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. Like this was just another normal night, like Jungkook standing there didn't disrupt anything. Sit, Jimin said, not looking at him. Jungkook hesitated. then obeyed. He sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together, his posture tense. Everything about this felt fragile, like one wrong word could shatter whatever thin thread Jimin had given him. Jimin leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his gaze finally lifting. Talk, he said. Jungkook exhaled slowly. This was it. No more avoiding. I don't expect things to go back to how they were, he started. Jimin's expression didn't change. Good, he said. Jungkook nodded, but I don't want to pretend this doesn't matter either. It matters, Jimin said, that's the problem. Jungkook looked at him, something tightening in his chest again. Then why does it feel like you're trying to erase it? Jimin's jaw clenched slightly, because remembering it the way it was hurts more than letting it go. Jungkook leaned forward, his voice softer now, but you didn't let it go. Jimin's eyes flickered. You're still here, Jungkook added. Silence. Heavy. Jimin pushed himself off the counter, walking slowly toward the living room. Each step felt deliberate, controlled, like he was measuring the distance between them in more than just space. I told you, Jimin said, stopping a few steps away. I need proof. Jungkook nodded, I know. Then start, Jimin said, right now. Jungkook hesitated. Jimin's gaze sharpened instantly. You see, this is exactly. I'm thinking, Jungkook cut in quickly, not avoiding. Jimin didn't look convinced. Then think faster, he said. Jungkook took a breath, forcing himself to steady. You asked me to tell you everything, he said, so I will. Jimin didn't move. I didn't just lie about choosing them, Jungkook continued. I lied about why I kept going back. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly. And why was that, he asked. Jungkook swallowed, because it was easier. The honesty landed between them like a weight. Easier than what? Jimin pressed. Easier than dealing with us, Jungkook admitted. Jimin's expression shifted, something sharp cutting through his composure. So you ran, he said. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Jimin let out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. At least you're finally honest about that. Jungkook looked down at his hands. I didn't know how to handle something that actually mattered. Jimin's voice was colder now, so you treated it like it didn't. Jungkook flinched. I thought I had time, he said. You didn't, Jimin replied immediately. I know that now. But you didn't then, Jimin said, and that's what matters. Jungkook looked up, his voice tightening. I can't change what I didn't know before. No, Jimin agreed, but you can live with the consequences. The words hit hard. But Jungkook didn't look away this time. I am, he said. Jimin studied him carefully, as if trying to decide whether that was true. Then why are you here? Jimin asked. Jungkook's answer came quieter this time. Because living with it doesn't mean I have to accept losing you. Jimin's expression flickered. Just slightly. That's not your choice anymore, he said. Jungkook nodded, I know, that's why I'm here asking, not deciding. The distinction hung in the air. Important. Jimin's gaze softened for a brief second before tightening again. You're saying the right things, he said. But Jungkook asked. But you've always been good with words when it's too late, Jimin replied. Jungkook let out a slow breath, then don't believe my words. Jimin raised an eyebrow slightly, what am I supposed to believe then? My actions, Jungkook said. Jimin's lips pressed together, and what actions are those? Jungkook hesitated for a moment, then stood. Jimin tensed slightly, his body instinctively reacting. I'm not leaving, Jungkook said. Jimin frowned, that's not exactly a groundbreaking action. It is for me, Jungkook replied, because before I would've. Jimin didn't respond. Jungkook took a small step closer, careful not to push too far. I would have avoided this, he continued. I would have waited for things to calm down, convinced myself it wasn't the right time, and then never said anything. Jimin's eyes stayed locked on him. And now, he asked. Jungkook held his gaze. Now I'm here, saying everything I should have said before, even if it doesn't change anything. The honesty settled heavily. Jimin's shoulders dropped slightly, the tension shifting. That doesn't fix what happened, he said. I know. And it doesn't guarantee anything, Jimin added. I know that too. Jimin looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that the silence started to feel like something else. Something less hostile. Something uncertain. You're different tonight, Jimin said finally. Jungkook exhaled, I had to be. Or what, Jimin asked. Jungkook's voice softened, or I'd lose you completely. Jimin's gaze flickered again. And this time, he didn't hide it as well. That already happened, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook shook his head, not completely. Jimin frowned slightly, you're very sure of that. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't true, Jungkook replied. Jimin looked away for a moment, his jaw tightening. When he looked back, something had shifted again. Less anger. More conflict. That's what makes this harder, Jimin admitted. Jungkook's heart skipped, what does? The fact that I can't just walk away like I thought I could, Jimin said. The words hit deeper than anything else. Because they weren't rejection. But they weren't acceptance either. They were something in between. In that space, that uncertain, fragile space, was where everything now existed. Jungkook took a slow breath, then don't walk away. Jimin let out a quiet laugh, but it wasn't mocking this time, it was tired. You make it sound simple. It's not, Jungkook said, but neither is pretending this doesn't matter. Jimin didn't argue. Because he couldn't. The silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something else. Something unresolved. Jimin looked at him, his expression softer now but still guarded. If I let you stay, he said slowly, this doesn't mean anything changes overnight. Jungkook nodded immediately, I know. And it doesn't mean I trust you again, Jimin continued. I understand. And it definitely doesn't mean we go back to how things were, Jimin added. I don't want that, Jungkook said, I want something honest. Jimin's gaze held his. Searching. Weighing. And then, slowly, he nodded. Not fully. Not completely. But enough. Then we start there, Jimin said quietly. Jungkook felt something shift in his chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something close. Something fragile. Something real. And for the first time since everything fell apart, there was a path forward. Unclear. Uncertain. But still there. And maybe that was enough. For now, morning didn't arrive gently. It broke through the apartment in harsh, uninvited light, slipping past the curtains and cutting across the room like something exposing everything they had tried to keep contained in the dark. Jungkook hadn't slept. He sat on the couch exactly where he had been hours ago, his body stiff, his thoughts louder than ever. The quiet of the night had been deceptive. It gave space for honesty, for fragile agreements, for things that almost felt like progress. But daylight made everything real. From the kitchen, the soft sound of a glass being set down echoed. Jungkook turned his head. Jimin stood there, already dressed, already composed, as if the night hadn't happened at all. His expression was calm, unreadable, but there was tension in the way his fingers lingered on the edge of the counter. You're still here, Jimin said. It wasn't a question. Jungkook exhaled slowly, you told me to stay. Jimin nodded faintly, I did. A pause. Then quietly, I didn't expect you to actually do it. Jungkook let out a dry breath, that sounds like you don't trust me. Jimin met his eyes, I told you I don't. The bluntness didn't sting as much this time. Maybe because Jungkook expected it. Fair, he said. Jimin studied him for a second, as if trying to read something deeper. Why didn't you leave? Jimin asked. Jungkook frowned slightly, you said to prove it. And sitting on a couch all night proves what exactly? That I'm not running, Jungkook replied. Jimin tilted his head slightly, his gaze sharpening, or that you don't know what to do next. Jungkook didn't deny it. Both, he admitted. Jimin looked away briefly, as if that answer unsettled him more than he expected. You always hate not knowing what to do, Jimin said. Jungkook gave a small, humorless smile, I hate a lot of things right now. Like what? Jungkook hesitated. Then quietly, like the fact that I hurt you more than I realized. Jimin's expression flickered. Just for a second. But he recovered quickly, crossing his arms, realizing it now doesn't undo anything. I know, Jungkook said, but it changes how I move forward. Jimin didn't respond. The silence stretched again, but it wasn't as suffocating as before. Just tense. Unresolved. Jimin walked closer, stopping a few steps away, his presence filling the space without overwhelming it. You said you'd be honest, he said. Jungkook nodded, I am. Then answer me something, Jimin continued, and don't think about it too much. Jungkook's chest tightened slightly, okay. Jimin held his gaze. When you chose them, he said, his voice calm but cutting, did you ever once think about what it would do to me? The question landed heavy. Direct. Unavoidable. Jungkook didn't look away. Yes, he said. Jimin's eyes narrowed slightly, then why did you still do it? Jungkook swallowed. Because I thought I could fix it before you found out, he admitted. Jimin let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and disbelief. So you gambled with something you knew mattered to me. Jungkook's jaw tightened, I didn't see it like that back then. But you do now, Jimin said. Yes. Jimin studied him carefully. And that's supposed to make it better, he asked. No, Jungkook said, it's just the truth. Jimin's gaze dropped briefly, then lifted again. You keep saying that, he said, like truth alone is enough. It's not, Jungkook admitted, but it's a start. Jimin shook his head slightly, you always talk about starts but you don't think about what comes after. Jungkook leaned forward slightly, his voice steady, then tell me what comes after. Jimin hesitated. And that hesitation, that small crack, said everything. I don't know, Jimin admitted quietly. Jungkook felt something shift again. Not hope, but something close to it. Then we figure it out, he said. Jimin's expression tightened immediately. You keep saying that like it's easy. It's not, Jungkook replied, but avoiding it hasn't worked either. Jimin looked at him, something conflicted flickering in his eyes. You're asking me to trust you again, he said. No, Jungkook corrected, I'm asking you to give me the chance to earn it. Jimin's gaze sharpened, and what happens if you fail? Jungkook didn't hesitate. Then I lose you, he said. The answer was simple. But it carried weight. Jimin's eyes lingered on him, searching for hesitation. There was none. Are you ready for that? Jimin asked quietly. Jungkook nodded, I have to be. Jimin exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping just slightly. You sound different, he said. I feel different, Jungkook replied. Or you're just scared, Jimin said. Jungkook met his gaze, I am scared. Jimin raised an eyebrow slightly. But I'm not running from it this time, Jungkook added. The honesty in his voice made something shift in the air. Subtle, but real. Jimin walked past him then, heading toward the window. He pulled the curtain back slightly, letting more light spill into the room. You know what scares me, Jimin said, his voice quieter now. Jungkook stood slowly, what? Jimin didn't turn around immediately. That I'll believe you, he said. The words hit harder than anything else. Jungkook's chest tightened, is that so bad? Jimin let out a soft, almost bitter laugh, it is if you prove me wrong again. Jungkook stepped closer, careful not to close the distance too quickly. I won't, he said. Jimin turned then, his expression sharp again, you can't promise that. I can promise I'll try, Jungkook corrected. That's not the same thing. I know, Jungkook said, but it's the only honest answer. Jimin stared at him. Long. Intense. As if weighing every word, every expression, every small shift in his voice. You're frustrating, Jimin muttered. Jungkook let out a small breath, you've said that before. Yeah, Jimin said, but back then it felt different. Jungkook's voice softened, better. Jimin hesitated. Easier, he admitted. Jungkook nodded slowly, I don't think this is ever going to be easy again. Jimin didn't disagree. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. Just real. And that made it heavier. Jimin ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. I have work today, he said suddenly. Jungkook blinked, okay. Jimin looked at him, this doesn't pause just because we had a conversation. I know. And I'm not rearranging my life around this, Jimin added. I'm not asking you to, Jungkook said. Jimin studied him again. You're really serious about this, he said. Jungkook nodded, I am. Jimin looked away for a moment, then back. Then don't disappear, he said. The words were simple. But they carried more meaning than anything else he had said so far. Jungkook felt it immediately. I won't, he said. Jimin held his gaze for a second longer. Then he nodded once. Not fully convinced. Not completely trusting. But not shutting him out either. And as Jimin turned to leave the room, grabbing his things without another word, Jungkook realized something that both steadied and terrified him at the same time. This wasn't about fixing everything anymore. It was about proving moment by moment that he wouldn't break it again. And that was a far harder promise to keep. The days that followed did not explode into chaos. They unfolded quietly. Carefully. Almost too carefully, like two people walking across thin ice, aware that one wrong step could send everything cracking beneath them again. Jungkook kept his promise. He didn't disappear. He showed up in the smallest ways at first, messages that weren't overwhelming, calls that didn't demand answers, silence that didn't feel like abandonment. He learned restraint, something he had never been good at before. He stopped trying to fix everything all at once and instead focused on not making things worse. Jimin noticed. Of course he did. He noticed the way Jungkook no longer pushed when he hesitated, the way he listened more than he spoke, the way his words, when he did speak, carried weight instead of excuses. But noticing didn't mean forgiving. Not yet. One evening, weeks later, the city outside hummed with life, distant traffic blending into a soft, endless rhythm. Jimin stood on the balcony of his apartment, the cool air brushing against his skin as he stared out into the lights. He heard the door slide open behind him. He didn't turn. "You always come out here when you're thinking too much," Jungkook said quietly. Jimin let out a faint breath, "And you always notice." "I'm trying to," Jungkook replied. A small silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. Jimin leaned against the railing slightly. "You've changed." Jungkook stepped closer but not too close. "I had to." Jimin glanced at him briefly. "For me." Jungkook shook his head. "No." That made Jimin look at him properly. "For myself," Jungkook continued, "because I didn't like who I was becoming. Hurting you just made me realize it faster." Jimin held his gaze, searching for something. "You really mean that?" he said softly. Jungkook nodded. "I do." Jimin looked away again, his expression distant but not cold. "I kept waiting for you to mess up again," he admitted. "I thought this version of you wouldn't last." Jungkook swallowed slightly. "Maybe you're still waiting." Jimin didn't deny it. "Maybe." Another pause. Then Jungkook spoke, his voice quieter than before. "I don't expect you to just forgive me," he said. "I don't even expect things to go back to how they were." Jimin's fingers tightened slightly on the railing. "Because they can't," Jungkook added. The honesty of it hung in the air. Heavy. But freeing. Jimin exhaled slowly. "Then what are we doing?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer just enough that the distance between them felt intentional, not accidental. "We're building something new," he said, "if you still want that." Jimin's heart stuttered at the words, though he didn't show it outwardly. "New," he repeated quietly. Jungkook nodded, not pretending nothing happened, not forcing it to be what it was, just something honest. Jimin closed his eyes for a second, letting the weight of everything settle. The past. The hurt. The effort. The quiet consistency that Jungkook had shown, day after day. When he opened his eyes again, they were softer. Not fully healed. But no longer guarded in the same way. "You know what scares me the most," Jimin said. Jungkook's voice was gentle. "What?" Jimin turned to face him fully now. "That I'm starting to believe you again." Jungkook didn't look away. "Then don't rush it," he said. "Take your time." Jimin studied him, something shifting deep within his chest. "You're not asking for anything," he said. "I am," Jungkook replied quietly. Jimin blinked. "What?" "A chance," Jungkook said, "just not all at once." Jimin's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, there was no sharp reply, no defense, no immediate pushback. Just thought. Just feeling. And then, slowly, Jimin stepped closer. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. But it was deliberate. The space between them disappeared, replaced by something fragile and uncertain, yet undeniably real. Jungkook didn't move. He let Jimin choose the distance. Let him control the moment. And when Jimin finally reached out, his hand brushing lightly against Jungkook's sleeve, it felt more meaningful than anything that had come before. "I'm not promising anything," Jimin said quietly. Jungkook nodded. "You don't have to." "I'm still angry sometimes," Jimin added. "I know. And I might pull away again." "I'll be here," Jungkook said. Jimin searched his face one last time. For lies. For hesitation. For the version of Jungkook that had hurt him before. But he didn't find it. Or maybe he chose not to look for it anymore. "Okay," Jimin said softly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a perfect ending. But it was enough. Jungkook let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between them didn't feel like something breaking. It felt like something beginning. The city lights flickered in the distance, steady and alive, as the two of them stood side by side, not as they once were, but as something new, something uncertain, and maybe, just maybe, something stronger.